Have you ever thought that someone could sell books without ever having read one? That someone could touch pages without knowing what they say, and still feel that inside them lies a world they've never known? This is the story of a regular woman in a regular city in the United States, but who carried a deep secret within her, a secret she hid from the world for over 50 years. Before I tell you what happened, comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if this story touches you in any way, make sure to subscribe, because what you're about to hear might change how you see yourself. Teresa lived in Phoenix, Arizona. Every morning before sunrise, she would lay out a faded cloth in the corner of the central market and place used books on top, donated from a closed-down library. She was quiet, discreet, selling her books for spare change. No one knew that although she adored each cover she touched, she couldn't read a single word inside them. Pretending was part of her routine. When someone asked if a book was good, she'd smile and say, "It's beautiful," without having any idea what the story was about. When a child asked for a suggestion, she'd give vague answers, repeating phrases she'd heard from others. Her world was made of colorful covers and silent shame. But everything changed on a seemingly normal afternoon. A little girl with braids and curious eyes walked up and asked, "Can I have a book about a princess who doesn't need saving?" Teresa hesitated, swallowed hard, and handed her a book based only on the cover. But the girl didn't leave. She sat right there on the ground and began to read aloud. Every word from that child's mouth pierced Teresa like an arrow. For the first time, she wasn't listening to a customer. She was hearing the words themselves. And it was as if something long asleep inside her had finally awakened. That night, Teresa couldn't sleep. For the first time in her life, she truly wanted to learn to read, not to please others, but to belong. 2 days later, with her heart pounding, she stepped inside a small community library she'd always been too afraid to enter. A woman at the front desk looked up and asked if she needed help. Teresa lowered her eyes, took a breath and said, "I want to learn how to read." The librarian smiled and gently took her hand. "You've come to the right place," she said. They started with letters, then syllables, then short sentences. Every new word was a victory, every mistake a battle fought. Sometimes she cried quietly, sometimes she laughed alone, finally understanding what a sentence meant. The world, once just images, began to reveal its meaning. Over time, Teresa began to read slowly. First children's books, then short stories. She kept selling books at the market, but now with a new posture. When someone asked if she'd read a book, she'd say, "Not yet, but I'm reading this one right now." Customers started noticing a difference. Children sat beside her to share their own books. A 6-year-old boy taught her what the word hope meant. Teresa wrote everything down in a small notebook she kept hidden in her apron. And little by little she began writing her own thoughts. Not perfect texts, imperfect, full of scratched out lines, but real. For the first time, they were hers. Then one day, the little girl with the braids came back. She was with her mother. Teresa saw her from afar and recognized her instantly. She grabbed the same book she'd once handed over and said, "Do you remember this one?" The girl smiled. Teresa, hands trembling, opened to the first page and read, out loud, fully, no pretending. The girl listened with awe. Her mother had tears in her eyes. That moment wasn't just a reading, it was a redemption, a rebirth, a turning point after years of shame, silence, and fear. The woman who had once only faked knowledge was now reading with truth, with courage. News of Teresa's story began to spread. People started coming to the market just to see her. Some brought books to donate. Others came just to listen. A retired teacher offered to help her improve her writing. A small local publisher visited her booth and offered to publish her story. Teresa hesitated. She didn't feel good enough. But after everything she'd overcome, she knew she couldn't hide anymore. She sat in her tiny home, opened her notebook, and began to write her own story. Full of smudges, full of soul. She titled it, "Words I Found After 50. The book circulated in schools, reading groups, and community centers. It took on a life of its own. Teresa began receiving invitations to speak about her journey. After one event, a woman approached her and said, "I've been hiding that I can't read, but after hearing you, I'm ready to learn." Teresa held her hand and replied, "If I could do it, so can you. All you need is a spark." The library that once welcomed her now named one of its rooms after her. The little girl with braids became a volunteer at a literacy program. And Teresa? She no longer sold books. She planted stories. Years later, with grey hair and a slower step, Teresa would sit by the window, holding a cup of tea and a stack of notebooks. She still wrote. She still replied to letters. She still inspired. One day, a young journalist knocked on her door with a weathered copy of her first book and said, "You changed my life." Teresa smiled, took a pen, and signed the book with trembling hands. She wrote, "It's never too late. It's only too late if you give up." And with that simple gesture, she closed yet another chapter, not of just any book, but of the most beautiful story she'd ever written, her own. Final lesson. Teresa's story teaches us something powerful. The greatest limitations are often the ones we place on ourselves. She didn't just learn to read, she learned to see herself differently. She discovered that no matter your age or your past, it's always possible to start again. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need the courage to turn the page. And maybe, just maybe, the story you've been afraid to write is the one that will inspire the world.